The Reconstructionist Radio Podcast Network brings to you a complete lineup of podcasts where you will hear practical and tactical theology. Our desire is not simply that you consume our shows, but that you also live out your faith in every area of life. We can talk all day long about these things, but if we fail to put them into practice, then we fail as ambassadors of Jesus Christ, our King. Subscribe now to your favorite Reconstructionist Radio Podcast Network shows, or you can subscribe to the Reconstructionist Radio Master Feed, where all of the content we produce, including the audiobooks and audio articles, will pop up as soon as they are available. And don't forget to visit reconstructionistradio.com to volunteer as a narrator or to partner with this ministry financially. May the Holy Spirit stir you into action for Christ and His kingdom. The Reconstructionist Radio Podcast Network presents Worldview Media Podcast, where Gordon and Joyce Runyon view popular media through the lens of the biblical five-point covenant model to help believers appreciate and apply principles of exciting narrative and engaging storytelling.
Coming to you live from number 10 Downing Street in jolly old London.
Cheerio.
It's the Worldview Media Podcast.
Hello. Morning, Governor.
That was my broadcast partner, Dick Van Dyke.
All right, so I haven't been abroad. But I have seen Mary Poppins.
You the only broad for me.
I'm a lady.
We're not talking about Mary Poppins. We're
not.
talking about the Netflix original series, The Crown.
The Crown.
So how would you describe this series, Mama?
Well, it's kind of interesting because you're looking at the history of the current queen. And so it's somebody that you're kind of familiar with. Of course, being Americans, we're not as familiar with her as, the people of the UK.
Sure.
And so it's an interesting look at some of her history, which of course I'm not all familiar with. We did see the one movie about her father.
The King's Speech.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so it kind of picks up there because it really takes over when she takes the crown and her father passes away.
Uh-huh. All right, so like Joyce intimated there, this is kind of supposed to be based on history. It's kind of biographical, and it focuses on Queen Elizabeth.
Mm-hmm.
As one Scottish preacher I listened to one time said, he referred to himself as a loyal subject of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II of England, and the first of Scotland. Because the first Queen of England, or the first Queen Elizabeth never ruled Scotland. So,
yes,
as far as he was concerned, she was the first Queen Elizabeth.
She was the first monarch over his land.
Right.
Yes.
And so it is, the characters are historical, and they're real life characters, at least.
And then just the whole mindset of what it means to have a monarch, to have a king or a queen. Java wouldn't know those things.
The cat wants to contribute.
She heard me.
Yeah, I was kind of hopeful that maybe watching the show would illuminate me a little bit on what purpose the monarchy still serves in Great Britain. Do you have any ideas on that?
Well, I think they just kind of reached an agreement to keep them intact, and everybody had their own position, because they do have a legislative body that they've always had. Probably didn't have as much influence as they do now. And so there are different aspects of their government that they both see to and about.
Yeah. I was gonna let the cat out of the studio.
Let the cat out of the bag.
I guess I saw them basically coming to a conclusion, and this is the character that was saying this would be Queen Elizabeth's elderly mother.
The Queen Mother.
The Queen Mother.
Yeah.
But
I think she's kind of a stink myself.
Yeah, she's not a hero.
No.
It almost sounded like she felt like their job was not to do anything, but to just be visible and to be. Did she almost at one point? This was early in the series, and so it's been a long time since we saw the early episodes. Mm-hmm. But didn't she say at one point that the monarchy kind of functioned as a bridge between the people and transcendence? That by looking at the monarchy, the people were given hope that there was something higher. Or, do you remember a speech like that?
Maybe vaguely. I think in this last episode that we saw that was called Gloriana, there was that one moment when they're taking the picture of her and they were saying, well, now you're not Elizabeth the daughter or the wife or the mother. Now you are Regina. You are the royalty. You are
almost a deity.
Yeah, you are more than any of those other things. And so that's there. And of course that's a completely foreign aspect to me,
for us,
to think of it, any person in that position that is currently living on this planet.
Yeah, I think that's probably true, and we can laugh at the British for having that sort of thing, but functionally in America, the government kind of still occupies that place.
It does,
so many people,
and I think more so than people realize.
Yeah.
But it's not an entity embodied in one person. It's just the entity itself. Yeah. Because we have presidents that come and go, and we have Congress people that come and go, and so it's not
but
really.
The state remains.
So, but it's not the person, and it really is Queen Elizabeth. I mean. Yeah. They celebrate her birthdays every year. They celebrate. I mean, it's just like it's a big, huge deal thing, and we don't do that. Yeah. We celebrate the nation's birthday. We celebrate other things. We celebrate past presidents. We do, but not to the extent that.
Oh no, it's totally different.
Yeah, it's a completely different mindset.
I did notice, and I noticed this too, the last time that we saw. What did we see? What was the last big thing with the monarchs? Did they have a wedding or something? Oh yeah, the wedding with the new. It's Prince Harry and the new princess.
Oh, it's not Harry. It's William.
William
and Kate.
William and Kate.
The new York people,
right.
The Duke and Duchess.
Okay, well, I noticed. Watching some of that ceremony on TV, and then also watching in the series The Crown when they have Elizabeth's coronation. Mm-hmm. The church plays a really big part in that. It's really not a government ceremony so much. You have all the government people there.
Well, you have to remember that in England, the head of the monarch is also the head of the church.
Yeah, the monarch is the head of the church.
And so it's again a different.
But I guess what I'm saying is that when you listen to the words of the ceremony, which they were very meticulous about getting these right, you can see that they're birthed in Christian concepts, And it's amazing then to see that even in a kingdom that has become so radically secular, that when they go do these ceremonies, the words of the ceremonies themselves wind up kind of witnessing against the nation and saying, look, this is from where you've fallen.
Yeah.
So I found that pretty interesting in the earlier episodes when she was just being coronated as the queen.
Having to step into all that.
So let me ask you, what do you like about this show, or do you like this series, or what's your take on it?
I think I do like it. I usually like things that are kind of historical pieces, and so this kind of falls into that genre. So I kind of like that. It's English, which is another, thing within the historical genres that I tend to gravitate towards. I like that, and I'm sure it's not all factual. I'm sure it's not, just because they're, by nature, I think you have to be very private about all of those inner workings within the family and how things go, and the speculation that happens around that there's probably things that are kind of made up and extrapolated. But it's interesting to see her as a younger woman kind of finding her path to being the queen.
Or once she's there, figuring out what that means.
Yeah, and it's a process for her. And then to see her now, because she seems very, to look at the queen now, she seems very cut off. She seems very separate from everybody.
Yeah.
And yet in this movie, you see her having to start doing that. She has to go out before her husband. They can't walk out together.
Yeah, right.
She has to keep her maiden name because that's what makes them royal. And so, all of these little things that she's had to say, okay, this is what I'll do, and maybe it's not what she would have done, but here I am, and so this is what's required of me, and so I guess I have to do this. And how that persona has been built up and solidified, even that that now she is this character, and I don't know if she's not ever that character, because you just, with interactions between her and her husband, maybe not so much with her kids, we don't see a lot of interactions that way in the series, but there's definitely some distance between the two of them, and that's just because she can't tell him a lot of stuff. She can't, it's not a real marriage where you share those type of things. So it's interesting in that aspect for me as well.
Yeah, I found it. I think what I like about this series is that you start out thinking it's going to be about her navigating all the political intrigue and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. By the time this first season is over, it's really not about that. It's about family and conflicts within families and about her marriage and how that's all going to work. And I guess we should say it's a really slow thing. For a modern television series, there's no action taking place, right?
There's verbal repartees.
Right. If you find political intrigue to be terribly exciting, then there might be some of that.
Well, they had that one episode where some kind of fog came in and settled over the country, and that was like a real big deal. But I never knew that had happened, and this was a historical thing. So it's been informational as well.
Right.
And just with all the rigmarole and the hoops to jump through to actually get her on the phone, and just all these things that we don't consider or think about.
So does it basically work for you? The writing, the acting, all of that?
Yeah, I like the characters. I like the actors doing the characters. Like I say, I think some of them are doing well, because there's some characters that I'm like, you're kind of a stinker. You're obviously not cast in a good light, and so it makes me a little bit curious about what's the real truth, and how all this works together.
Well, I have to say that I guess I'm not so... I think the lead woman playing Elizabeth does an adequate job. Mm-hmm. I'm not blown away by her acting or anything. But Jonathan Lithgow as Winston Churchill blows me away.
Yeah.
Because initially in the series, when I saw, that's Jonathan Lithgow playing Winston Churchill, I was like,
that's crazy. That's a reach.
I can't buy Dick Solomon as Winston Churchill.
Big giant head.
Not when you also have Doctor Who playing Elizabeth's husband.
Prince Philip.
And
yeah.
So I just really thought that both those two things were going to put me off. But now I noticed this last episode we watched, the one at the end of the season, he wasn't Jonathan Lithgow. He was Winston Churchill.
Yeah.
And his little idiosyncrasies and the way he talks and his facial expressions, instead of going, that's John Lithgow, I'm saying, that's the way Winston is. You know? And so I think he's done a fantastic job, for me anyway.
And there's the little side stories, because there was... in this more recent episode that we watched, there was really a lot more
character
background
development
of Winston and his personal life, and everybody knows him as the political man, but to know some of his backstory and.
Well, they made a decision with Winston, because what do we know him for now? The series picks up after World War II, so we don't see him leading the nation and all that, but what do we know him for? We basically know him as this master of one-liners and zingers and the quip, the insult, the amazing turn of a phrase.
Yeah.
And they don't have him doing any of that in this series, or if they do, it's so sparse and far between. And so I don't know if that's brave for them to go a different direction and not highlight that, or if it's...
Unfortunately, we are very uneducated historically.
I don't know anything about Winston.
So long as he doesn't try to phone into the big giant head, I may believe most anything he does is Churchill, but he did a good job with that. And I think even in the progression of time from where he started to where this, the most recent one was where he stepped down from being the prime minister, you could see him becoming more frail and more tired.
He's growing decrepit as the series moves on. Well, so I think Lithgow is fantastic as Winston Churchill, and frankly, Matt Smith as Prince Philip, is that his name? Mm-hmm. He's grown on me a lot. And
as he did as the Doctor.
As he did as the Doctor. Yeah, I didn't like him at first as the Doctor. So here he is, and he communicates a lot with just facial expressions, and you can see him becoming exasperated without saying anything.
That's a hard place to be, because as the man, you're supposed to be the head of your house. And he has no place. He has no place.
Right, that's right.
And so that's a real hard place to be in, when you don't fit anywhere.
All right, so Joyce is sneaking into worldview content territory, and I think that's probably where we need to go. So let's take a break and we'll be right back.
Are you interested in Christian education? Would you like to learn how to be a Christian teacher or how to run your very own Christian school with success? The GCS Apprenticeship Program can help. Learn more on our website at gcsapprenticeship.com.
And we're back, Worldview Media Podcast, part of the Reconstructionist Radio Network.
Yeah, go ahead.
You don't think I'll do it, do you?
I don't know if you'll get it right.
Reconstructionist Radio Podcast Network, your one-stop audio shop for all your dominionizing needs.
Well, there you go. You're fancying it up now.
And this is the Worldview Media Podcast, the most frivolous podcast on that network.
It makes me feel...
guilty.
Just silly.
Like you're right. Like you're not redeeming the time. Yeah.
That's how it makes you feel.
That's how it makes me feel. I've got stuff to do, and here we are. Okay, so you mentioned before the break that a lot of the conflict, a lot of the story, one of the main plots is the relationship between Queen Elizabeth and her husband, and the conflict that's there because of the fact that she's the representative of God on earth as far as the UK is concerned, and he is just supposed to stand there and shut up and walk behind her and not do or say anything. And
be supportive by doing nothing.
right. He's her helpmeet.
Neat?
Yeah, to use the King James there. Yeah. So, I think it does kind of explore that situation that he's a strong-willed individual, and
well, and you have to think back to when they got married, that there was no even vague idea that her dad wouldn't be around for a long time.
Oh yeah. Right.
You know, so maybe eventually she would be queen, but certainly not
right away.
Yeah, when she had to step into her role. And she was starting to do some things and go out and represent, and do all that stuff. And then suddenly, bam, you're it. And that's a big adjustment.
Yeah, and so that's been interesting watching that conflict happen, watching that take place. And at first, I think they tried to depict their private life as being more conventional. Once there's nobody around watching them, he's maybe more vocal, more of a leader, and
in the beginning,
and she's happy for him to take that, and for him to make decisions about where they're going to live and stuff like that. And she stands up to people at times to get his wish to take place. But even that, she has to make his wish take place. He can't do it.
He has no power or authority.
Right. And so that's been very interesting.
In his own home.
Right.
That's...
And now, you mentioned before the break that I think one of the arcs that you see over the course of the season is, at first she doesn't know what the heck is going on, and she's struggling to figure out a role. And by the end of the series, of the season, I'm talking like a British person now, by the end of the series, she is not only deciding that she needs to be the queen and stop complaining about it, but she is kind of hardening in that.
And I kind of talked about that a little bit before, that she's solidifying her character.
Right. She knows not everybody's going to be happy with it, and that's just tough, and this is what she has to do.
Well, in thinking about it, to get ready for our little podcast here, I really thought that there was a theme throughout the entire season of duty. And what does duty mean, and how do you carry that out?
Right.
And do you still have to be dutiful if it's hard? Is there a way to kind of wiggle around? And,
no, you're right.
And
that's a big deal.
So that duty was a real big thing, and of course with duty comes responsibility, as they would say with Spider-Man. With great power.
Said the king to her on his deathbed.
So that's something that I've crystallized in my head when I was thinking about it, that duty really is a major theme through the season.
Yeah, you're right. And especially
with Churchill, what is his duty? What is his duty to the new queen? What does she have to do?
Right.
How are the parties going to have to be dutiful to her? How is she dutiful to the church? Can she escape the church? Does she have to, what about her husband? So she's got all these things, and so that just...
She's being pulled in a lot of different directions. Yeah.
So what is your duty?
Yeah. Very interesting. And then this last episode, she was in a really rough spot. She spent a lot of the episode trying to figure a way that she could make everybody happy that she cared about.
Yeah.
And when she realized nobody's going to be happy, and I just have to do what I have to do. That was a rough decision.
Yeah.
One of the things that I have noticed about that is kind of in the same vein, is that they act like when she's coronated and when she's being introduced to the prime minister and all the leaders of the government, they kind of act like her role is significant and important and that she has a bunch of power. But really, when she tries to do what she wants to do, she realizes she really doesn't have any power at all. And
she's limited.
Right, and the parliament can come in, and the cabinet and the prime minister can come in and kind of shut her down a lot. And she really has to fight sometimes to get her way. And I thought that was really interesting that according to her title and her crown, she's the top dog, but she's really not.
Well, it really is a partnership with a true government body, governing body, and with a figurehead of the monarchy.
Well, what would you say her function is as it's portrayed in this series with regard to the government? I think it boils down to she's kind of a voice of conscience. Because she can chew people out for being unethical and for letting folks down, but she's got no jurisdiction. She doesn't make the government do anything. She can and did bring leaders of the government in and kind of dress them down and let them know she wasn't pleased. But that's just chewing them out. There's not really much to that. And then in this last episode as well, one of her major functions is to be the defender of the faith, the head of the church, the head of the Anglican church, and she's not. I mean, she's got that. Her name's on the plaque, but
she doesn't really have any authority.
But she's bound. When she wants to make a decision, the Archbishop of Canterbury comes in with all his cronies, and they've got the robes and the big giant crosses around their necks, and they tell her what the deal is with the church and with morality.
Well, when they were doing that, the last episode is about her sister, Princess Margaret, who wants to marry a divorced man.
Guy, right.
And of course, everybody's just rolling over. Well, you can't marry a divorced person. If their spouse is dead, that's different, but a divorced person. And so, first off, I have to kind of chuckle because, here we are, and Prince Charles, who was just a wee lad at the time,
he stands to be the king.
Has married a divorced lady.
Right. He's in line to be the king.
And is in line to be the king. So I don't know. It was probably like a little quiet ceremony. It wasn't a big, huge deal thing, but still. And her sister couldn't do that. And so they were saying, well, this just isn't allowed and it isn't possible. And I had to think of her great-great-great-great-grandpa, maybe, Henry, who did many a darn thing. And she didn't say, look here, this has been done. I will have this be done again, and that's all there is to it. And so I don't know.
Yeah.
But that's me.
Yeah.
And so there's just some things there that I'm like, is she just not really educated in these things?
I think if she were to answer that question, she would say, yes, that's true, I'm not educated. There at the beginning, that was kind of a topic of one of the episodes, right? Is that once she became the queen and is receiving all this information that she had never received, she realized she was totally out of her depth and had no clue.
And she'd probably been given the education of a lady. Where
she knew how to play the piano and
paint.
Crochet. And they probably call it something fancier than that.
Needlework, the embroidery.
Right.
So.
And I thought in that episode she was kind of like a proto don't freak out about the language, but I think she was like a proto-feminist, not a radical liberal feminist, but a woman who realized the only way for her to serve her country was to get educated. And so on her own expense, she started hiring a tutor and
working,
realizing I don't have what I need to do this job, and I'm not going to complain about it. I'm going to fix it. And so I thought that was good. All right, anything else about The Crown?
I thought also with the episode with Winston where they were working on his painting that there was some poignancy there with how we tend to see ourselves and how everybody else sees us. You know, because I think as we age, we always maybe kind of tend to think of us more as we were prime than as we are aging and becoming more unable to function well and do as much and be as strong and go as long and do all those things. And even though you realize in your head, well, yeah, I can't really do all that, I don't think you see yourself as aging or becoming aged. And so that was interesting because they had to paint his portrait. And I think he knew, okay, yeah, I'm not like in the best shape for you to capture me forever on a canvas. So, you know, his thing was, you know, be kind and remember that it's not just me you're doing, it's the office, it's all the prestige, it's all these things, and that he couldn't deal with what he saw
when
on the portrait and how he saw
back,
himself.
Yeah, the portrait came back too accurate, too close to reality, and he freaked out about that and got upset. I think he was wanting the portrait painter to figure out a way to kind of lionize him, you know, and flatter him, maybe erase some wrinkles or something like that, and make him look like a hero or something. And he didn't do that at all.
Yeah. Well, I know he accused the guy of, you know, I thought we were friends and this is how you portray me. And, you know, the guy told him, I respected you before I walked in to do this, and I respect you more now. Yeah. And so...
Yeah, even though you hate the painting.
Well, but it's hard to look at yourself, honestly, in photographs, in anything, because you think, oh, wait a minute, I don't look like that. You know, I'm not...
My voice doesn't sound like that.
That's not me. What's going on? So, you know, that was an interesting thing to bring to light, because I think everybody's like that.
Yeah. So we end season 1 with obviously some real trouble brewing in the marriage between the Queen and Prince Philip, and it's not going to get any better because now he's headed to Australia for probably months.
And I think it was suggested by the Queen Mother that he go off and...
But she wants him to come back a changed man. And she wants him to figure out what he's doing wrong and fix it and then come back better. And
golly, that's a hard spot for him. He doesn't have anything to do. He doesn't have a job. He doesn't have anything. And they get mad at him because he goes out and he goofs around and he gets drunk and probably drinks a little bit too much and gets a little too raucous. But what is he supposed to do?
Yeah, and so the other big deal is it looks like Great Britain has managed to offend the leader of Egypt, and Egypt is threatening to fight Britain with the last drop of Egyptian blood. So that's where the season ends. And in just a little bit of time before we end, I had a reader contact me because months ago, Jordan and I talked about Breaking Bad.
Oh, yeah.
And it was when we were only a couple of seasons into it. I think there's 5 or 6, and we were only 2 or 3.
Yeah.
And I had a reader or a listener write to me and say, if you finished it, I'd be interested in hearing if your opinion has changed or what is.
Yeah.
Once you see how it turns out.
Are you finished with it?
Yeah, I finally watched the last episode.
That explains all the marathon watching here
Not
recently.
marathon. It was like I watched 2. And so I did finally finish the series.
Yeah.
And as far as me thinking that it was great, that it was really well done, I'd say yeah. There were a couple of times as things moved on, you haven't watched it at all, but the protagonist, who really turns out to be a bad guy, but the protagonist, Walter White, he's a genius, a science genius. And there were a couple of times during the series where I felt like he got himself out of trouble by kind of being MacGyver, and that irritated me a little bit. He'd kind of MacGyver his way out of trouble.
Not very realistic.
I didn't think so. It didn't have as much dark humor as before. I think it got a lot more serious as it went along. There were places in the first couple of seasons where I was laughing out loud. It was dark humor, and it was sometimes very gross and grotesque, but yeah, I admit I was still laughing out loud and having a great time. But
I don't know if that's a good thing to admit.
Right. But at the end, it did get pretty dark. But what I appreciated then is right at the end. See, I think the whole series forms like a parable of total depravity, and you can't just nibble at sin and think you're going to imbibe like a safe amount, that it's going to drag you farther in, and you're going to keep chewing off more and more. And I think it's a series-long parable of that until right at the end. Walter White has to admit that even though for the whole series he's been justifying his actions by saying, I'm just trying to provide for my family before the cancer kills me. Well, right at the end, I think it might have been the very last episode, he winds up admitting, no, I did all this for me. I liked it, and I was good at it, and I enjoyed being... I enjoyed being in charge, and he wound up being the kingpin and having his own drug empire and stuff, and he did it because it made him feel good. He liked how it made him feel. And so I really appreciated that right at the end, that admission, and that was pretty neat, really significant. The scene was set up so that that's all that was going on was that admission, and I thought it was really powerful and really creative the way the whole thing was filmed. The last half of the last season was really breathlessly paced, because there comes a time when Hank's brother-in-law, who's a DEA agent, and Hank's been getting away with all this right under his nose for years. Well, right at the very end, his brother-in-law, Hank, figures it out. You see the light bulb go on in his head. He figures it out. And then, as soon as he figures it out, man, these big old dominoes start falling, and major characters getting killed, and just all, it all hits the fan. Yeah. And it was really exciting. So it was really well done that way, I thought. And then the other bit, worldview-wise, that I thought was really good and I really appreciated is that one of the main characters was this younger guy named Jesse. And he was always kind of a no account and not very, he's worthless. But throughout the series, he's kind of the only guy with a real conscience, a real functioning conscience. Now, he doesn't know what to do with it when he is overcome by guilt. And he goes crazy, like literally crazy at times because of the guilt. And that last season, Jesse dealing with the guilt, I thought was just really super, really illustrative of, this is how sin destroys people. Even if they don't want to hurt people and stuff like that, it winds up hurting people. And this is how guilt causes people to, there are people who kill themselves over guilt and stuff. And you can really see that. And so I thought that was really well done. Now, there was no redemption in the series, which was tough to deal with from a Christian standpoint, but accurate nonetheless. If you're not going to pursue the redemption of God, you're not going to seek it.
Yeah, that's the conclusion you're going to come
then
to.
everything's going to break bad,
Yeah.
And so that's my thought. I don't have a whole podcast worth on that, but
just the update.
yeah, it was uneven. There were a couple of seasons that I didn't think were quite as good as the rest, but the last half dozen episodes were dynamite. I thought it was really good.
Well, all right.
All
so
right.
would you watch it again?
No, I'm not going to watch it again.
Well, all right. Well, I won't watch it at all.
Now, Jordan didn't get to watch the last season.
Yeah.
Because she's off doing adulting and stuff.
Well, she may get to that, though, because she's also has time to download things and view them.
Well, maybe so. But if she comes home and wants to watch the last season, I may watch it with her.
Oh,
but
I see.
I wouldn't start over and watch the whole thing again.
Now you're making clarifications that you may be watching it again, but it doesn't mean anything.
Not by myself. It would have to. My TV buddy would have to be there with me.
Well, all right then.
All right. I don't have anything else for this episode. You?
No.
All right.
I say we'll be done.
Well, then let's be done. So, till next time, go out there and dominionize. Thanks for listening.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Worldview Media Podcast. Please visit reconstructionistradio.com to check out the other podcasts in our network and to download our free audiobooks.